Hey guys, what is up? Excoundrel here, and today we are going to be going through Update 3.4 meta picks. I have completely changed the way that this video looks compared to my previous ones. I basically sat down this afternoon and re-edited it. I made myself work hard to get it out, so you guys had this very early on into the update. Obviously, guys, if you are enjoying the content on my channel, make sure you subscribe and click the bell button. That would really help me out, and you can get updates about when my videos do come to your screens. Right. Let's start with the top lane. The top lane is a weird place in the meta right now. You end up 2v1 most of the time. The enemy bot lane and the enemy jungler often try and 2v1 you, and so that means there's a very specific set of heroes that are good in the top lane. Let's start with probably one of the most popular, and that is Adagio. Now, people are playing him CP with the core of Alternating Current and Broken Myth, but a lot of people are playing him like a secondary captain because he works so well with the new item Capacitor Plate. So they pick up the Storm Crown to help with wave clear, to help him deal with the 2v1 shove so he can just clear those minions really quickly, and then they build to a supportive, heavy healing type role, and usually it's going to be working with a hyper carry mid laner. So you can see his win rate has hovered up on update 3.4, and you can see he also tends to do well as the game goes on. There's a massive dip in his win rate around 25 to 35 minutes for some reason. Who knows why that is. Right, moving on, we're going to look at Grace. Grace is a super strong weapon power top laner. I wouldn't play her in the supportive role in the top lane, although it is possible. Most people are playing her with the core items of Serpent's Mask and Breaking Point. And what this does is it allows her to have sustain in lane through Serpent's Mask. She's got pretty good wave clear with the use of her A and her heroic perk. So she's really, really good at holding out in a 2v1 situation. Obviously, with the reductions in cooldown to her ultimate, that means post level 6, she's got a way of stopping tower dives, and she also retains her utility as the game goes on. Grace is in a really good position as a top laner right now. Right, going on to our next hero, we have got Reza. Believe it or not, Daddy Reza is a good top laner at this point in time. He's got decent wave clear with his A, and he actually has a pretty cheap build that he can spike off and actually be useful in the mid game. So the Aftershock Broken Myth build, it is a cheap build to get your hands on. It makes him very useful, and the burst damage is surprisingly good. A lot of Reza players are pretty apt at 2v1ing as well, so if they find themselves in a 2v1 situation, they can use their ultimate to duke out abilities and sometimes come out trading 1-for-1 or even taking that 2v1 situation. As you can see, Clockwork I've added there as well. If you get a third item, a Clockwork is a good addition to Reza's kit, so I would consider that. He does tend to fall off towards the end of the game though. Generally he's kind of an early mid-game spiking hero and doesn't have the best late game in the world. So, believe it or not, this is a really odd addition to my top 4 here on the top lane, and a lot of people will be like, oh, Excoundrel, what the hell, Ozo? Ozo's weapon power build is really strong. Again, similar core to Grace. He's got great sustain. He's quite obnoxious to play against weapon power, so he's a pretty decent top laner in solo queue. So I would definitely consider Ozo if you want to pick him up in the top lane if you're a good Ozo player. He's a bit of a curveball addition to this top 4, but I think he's the perfect place for the meta in the top lane right now. I think he can survive 2v1s quite nicely, and he scales up with that build, as you can see there, well into the late game too. Alright, we're having a surprise addition to the meta conversation. It is the off-meta, in inverted commas, pick. Now, this is not always going to be off-meta, guys. A lot of you will see these off-meta picks and say, I've played that since I was 2 years old, and it's been my main forever. Yeah, this is just to discuss a kind of a pick that's not super core in the meta right now, but is definitely popular, and Catherine top lane is one of those. You go Storm Crown if you want to for the wave clear, but you can skip Storm Crown and go towards a Aftershock and a Clockwork build, but Storm Crown and Aftershock do the same thing, they just make you a bit tankier, and being tanky as a top lane right now is good, so the Storm Crown Aftershock build in the top lane is pretty decent for helping you clear waves, retaining your utility as well with all that cooldown reduction. So that is a good build for Catherine in the top lane. She's an off-meta top laner. If you're a good Catherine player, you can play her up there, and she has seen some success. I'm looking at you, Bayou. Right. Let's move on to our next section, and we are going to be looking at the mid lane. You might have guessed we're going to move down the carries and then cover the junglers and the captains afterwards, but we're going to look at the mid lane now. Mid lane hasn't changed too much over the last update. Celeste is still super strong. She still has a good win rate. Her build path is very similar. She took a little bit of a hit in 3.3, but seems to be rising back up to the forefront in 3.4. Obviously, she scales really nicely into the late game as well. So, Celeste is very much well and alive. She's got good poke. She's got great wave clear, which allows her to roam. She's got a bit of CC. Even the ultimate nerf hasn't hit her too hard, as it still does a lot of damage, even if the speed of the projectiles have been reduced. So Celeste overall is a solid place in the mid lane right now, and isn't really going anywhere, I think, until they touch either supernova damage or again try and tweak her ultimate a bit more, maybe decrease the burst damage on it. But I see Celeste's getting off 1 or 2 ultimates a fight now, maybe up to 3. I've been in longer fights where Celestes have got off 3 ultimates, so it is crazy to play against her sometimes. Alright, this little boy in collaboration with his skins, SEMC, thanks for the money. No, I'm joking. Scarf is really good in the meta right now. Again, wave clear is really important to mid laners. He builds very similarly to Celeste. He's got great late game damage output. His roam potential is quite strong. He's got good poke as well. Scarf is just a solid pick in the mid lane in this current point in time. And with Taka kind of falling out of the meta, weapon power Taka and with CP Taka going down, a lot of these mid laners have less, I think, direct counters to them, with Kensei being pretty much 100% banned. And a lot of these mid laners that are usually quite vulnerable are in a good position. And the fact that you've got supports that relish the capacitor plate, you have support top laners there to protect your hyper carry mid laners. Hyper carry mid laners are in right now, so Celeste and Scarf easily protected, lots of high damage output, good picks. Another really good pick on this current update is Varia, and she's been there for a couple of updates now, and you can see the box win rate by patch. It really hasn't fluctuated too much. Varia has been pretty much untouched. Her CP build path is, as you see there. Now, you can change up the Spellfire for a Clockwork. That would be more classic, but I have seen the Spellfire build path has got a very high win rate. As you can see there, it's the highest win rate. Even though it's got a very low pick rate, I urge you to go and try it out, because honestly, Spellfire, super crucial right now with the massive influx of the capacitor supports. So Spellfire is just almost core in every mid laner's kit, because there are just so many heals that you have to deal with. It's why that Poison Shiv and Spellfire users are at the top of the meta right now. Alright, Malene. Despite the nerfs, still in a great position. There are 2 build paths that I want to talk to you about here. The classic Aftershock build path, and again, Spellfire, Broken Myth, or you can build all 5 if you really want to, are there to be talked about. Broken Myth, you may be able to swap out all 3 of those at the end. This is the I'm the Doom build. Now, a lot of you guys know that I play with I'm the Doom quite a lot. This is the I'm the Doom Malene build. Double Shatterglass, Broken Myth, Clockwork, or Shatterglass Spellfire if you need it, Broken Myth, Clockwork. I urge you to go and try it out. Right, time for our surprise mid lane off meta pick. And it is going to be Lyra CP. She's really strong. She's probably stronger as captain right now, but definitely a viable mid laner if you like playing Lyra. This is a build that is pretty common on her. The alternating current into Dragon's Eye, Spellfire, and Broken Myth. That Dragon's Eye can be subbed out for a Shatterglass if you want the extra burst. But Lyra is a very viable mid laner in this current meta. She's pretty strong as well if you ever get the chance to try her out. But she's really strong on the current update as a captain, so she will be in my captain picks. Sorry, a spoiler. But she's also a pretty good off-meta mid laner if you guys want to play her as well. Right, that is everything for mid lane. So let's move on to our next, which is going to be bot lane. That's right, we're moving down all the way through the carries, and we're going to be focusing on bot lane. Bot lane meta is weird in the sense that you have to play, often you have to play weapon power. Weapon power bot lane is now kind of the meta. So you'll find that all of my picks here for bot lane are weapon power. A lot of them are Poison Shiv users as well, because Poison Shiv is really strong in the meta, and a lot of them work well with junglers, because you end up being 2v1 in the bot lane, and that's kind of how the meta has developed. So, Kinetic. Now, you might have seen my Kinetic video recently talking about her CP and weapon power build paths. Over the last few days, it's sort of transpired that Kinetic's weapon power build path is probably her strongest of the 2, and you build a very Vox-like, except for the spell sword obviously, but the Poison Shiv and Breaking Point, all about sustain, all about generating up your tracer shots, getting 4 stacks of those, you stack your Breaking Point really quickly, and you're very, very difficult to chase down as well, because you've got a little bit of mobility in your kit. So Kinetic, weapon power bot lane, super strong right now. Alright, this guy is 100% banned 100% of the time, but if you don't see him banned, he's a really strong bot laner, has one of the highest win rates on the current update. Even despite the nerfs, you can see he only took a slight hit to his overall win rate, but this build path here is pretty much the go-to for Kensei's. Poison Shiv, Breaking Point, Spell Sword, and then you build a bit of defense in there as well. It's really easy to keep yourself alive because you have your barrier, and obviously stack some defenses on top of that, and you become pretty strong. So Kensei, if you can play him and get your hands on him, is a really strong bot laner in the current meta. Really good 1v1, pretty good in team fights. Definitely 100% recommend trying this guy out if you have not already. Although, if he's not banned, like I said. Okay, moving on, Ringo. And now, look at Ringo's win rate over the last couple of updates. The last update changed the way that attack speed worked. They lowered the interval to 0.7 seconds between everybody's base attack speed levels, and then they decreased the attack speed on items. Ringo made a huge benefit out of this, because what has actually happened with attack speed is that in the later game, if you have attack speed items and you have high attack speed, you're actually going to feel like you're doing way more damage because your attack speed is way higher. Ringo's Twirling Silver, in collaboration with attack speed items and the way that the attack speed was changed on update 3.4, has made him a machine in the late game. He can stack Breaking Point like a monster. Terms of choosing here, you can go Sorrow Blade or Spell Sword. Spell Sword gives you a pretty much 100% uptime on Twirling Silver, so it's a really useful item. And Tornado Trigger, the passive works really well with Ringo, especially with his Twirling Silver. It makes him very hard to catch and allows him to be a super mobile ranged weapon power carry. Ah yes, surprise, surprise. You guys were thinking, he's not talked about Vox yet. Nah, Vox is still good. Vox, again, will always remain pretty good, and actually, with the attack speed changes, also received a small increase in his win rate on this update. His build path has not changed. It's Poison Shiv, Breaking Point, Sorrow Blade, and build those tanky items afterwards. Just about that sustained damage. This is Vox in a nutshell, and he's probably not going to go anywhere. Like I said, he's just got a really good kit, and it's very difficult to knock this guy out of the meta. Right. Surprise, what are we going to see for our off-meta pick in the bot lane? It's Gwen. Oh, wait, she's not off-meta. I know, but what I really want to hammer home with this Gwen pick is that because of the tension bow nerfs, Gwen has kind of been seeing less play. A lot of other bot laners have been coming in. So Gwen has still got a really high win rate on this update. She just builds a little differently now. In fact, one of the most popular builds for her is a very similar build to Vox, but you do it the other way round. You go for the Sorrow Blade, Breaking Point, Poison Shiv in a different way. The Tension Bow build is still very viable, but because of the Tension Bow nerfs, it does drop off pretty heavily. But obviously you build that Breaking Point to give her some longevity into the late game. Obviously Gwen is not super off meta. I just wanted to throw it in there because she should really be in that top 4. But there are just a couple of other picks that kind of shine a bit brighter than her right now. Okay, now we're going to move on to our junglers. That's right, we're going to move on to jungle, and we'll be discussing this now. Jungle has changed quite significantly over the last update. Because of the meta being a 2v1 in the bot lane, a lot of the junglers that you're going to see in the meta right now are those that can abuse the bot lane really easily. Kestrel, especially CP, is one of those. She spikes pretty hard early, she's really good at abusing a lane, and she's quite obnoxious to play against. The Kestrel build, as you can see, hasn't changed much over the last few updates. Shatterglass into Spellfire, into Clockwork, into Broken Myth. The Weapon Power build path is viable as well. A lot of people go Spell Sword into Breaking Point, into Double Monocle. Obviously, Sorrow Blade is a replacement for Spell Sword if you want that extra damage output. But Kestrel, especially CP, a really good jungler on the current update because of the way that the jungle plays. When you play a jungler now, you go to the bot lane, you duo the lane with your bot laner, you look to put pressure on the enemy top laner in a 2v1 situation. You then farm that bottom jungle on rotation with your bot laner. That's kind of how the meta has transpired. Probably going to do a video on the current meta early next week so you guys can understand how it's being played out at high levels. So Samuel, who was previously a really strong mid laner and is still a strong mid laner if you get to play him, has kind of made a little bit of a transition to the jungle. He can be really oppressive in that early laning phase against the enemy top laner in a 2v1. He's very, very good at just walking into a lane and helping siege turrets. Samuel actually is a pretty strong jungler in 5v5 right now. Build path, Spellfire first. He's one of those weird CP carries that builds Spellfire first. But that's pretty good for the current meta, obviously, because of the way that healing works. And if you're playing up against an Adagio in a 2v1 situation, having a Spellfire early is really good. Dragon's Eye, Clockwork into Broken Myth. And this guy, I love this guy. It's probably one of my best heroes in terms of performance over the course of the last few weeks of Vainglory. Glaive is a really strong jungler, especially weapon power. Building Spell Sword over Sorrow Blade gives you the ability to regenerate energy much quickly and get that afterburn off cooldown. The reason that he's good is you can walk into that bot lane 2v1 and constantly look to pressure with that afterburn. You can make turret dives happen really easily. You can outposition your enemy top laner really nicely in a 2v1 and set up for kills. So Glaive, also if you leave that bot lane, you can gank the mid lane really easily, and then you can go back to bot lane using the river buff nicely as well. So Glaive, just a strong jungler right now, especially with those attack speed changes. He can hit really hard and stack Breaking Point very, very quickly too. And finally, Baptiste. Baptiste is mainly played weapon power jungle, and his core items are Poison Shiv and Breaking Point. You can kind of build whatever you want after that. I wouldn't recommend going too offensive though. You do need that defense to make him viable in longer team fights. But these two items, especially when you are empowered during your Reap passive, you're going to get a huge amount of stacking on that Breaking Point because your weapon power goes up really nicely. He's good at putting pressure on an enemy top laner because of his Ordained, and he can push the wave nicely with his Bad Mojo, even as a weapon power build path. So Baptiste, I think, personally, really good in this current update, and also, again, can walk to mid, gank it quite easily, and retains really good utility in team fights because of his ultimate. Alright, boys, which one is it going to be this time? And girls, I should say. It's going to be Blackfeather, because a lot of North American junglers are playing him CP. CP Blackfeather has been kind of making the rounds a little bit. Again, similar vein to what we've talked about previously. When you get that Aftershock spike, your on point does a little bit of damage. You can look to pressure the enemy laner in a 2v1 situation nicely. And even early on, your on point is going to harass the enemy slowly. His weapon power build path is super viable. The Serpent's Mask Breaking Point has not changed. Blackfeather can be played as a bot laner as well, and a lot of people will play Blackfeather mostly as a bot laner, you will see, but again, if you want to try out a slightly different jungler, and you like playing Blackfeather, he is pretty good in the jungle right now, especially on that CP build path. Right, that is it for our jungle, which means we're going to move over to captains, and these really are the picks that have defined the meta right now. The captain picks, because of the new items, have kind of shaped how we're seeing the meta develop, and we'll talk about that once we get there. Obviously, Capacitor Plate is the item of choice and it's really made a lot of captains super viable. The first of which is Lyra. Lyra is so good on the current update with Capacitor Plate. Now, this is my core build for Lyra. Fountain, Crucible, Capacitor Plate, War Treads. I often then either build Capacitor Plate second or Crucible second, depending on who I'm playing against. Crucible, I feel like, is a core item for most captains now, especially in 5v5, less so for 3v3. But in 5v5, there is always going to be something that you want to block realistically, so having a Crucible kind of feels like a must-have item for most captains in a 5v5 situation. Obviously, you can also consider Rook's Decree on Lyra, because when you use your heal and then you land a long-range basic attack, or you use your portal and then you land a basic attack, you're going to give everybody a shield on your team. That synergizes with the Capacitor Plate, that's really nice. But again, that's a decision that you should make in game depending on what you need. You might need the vision for an enemy Kestrel, so you get the scout cam stuff, or you might end up needing some armor as well. So again, Rook's Decree is not 100% in that build, but it is something that you should consider. So just as we talked about Adagio in the top lane, Adagio is also a good captain. Similar vein to Lyra, his heals do so well with Capacitor Plate. And again, Rook's Decree is a really good item to add to his kit as well, but again, you need to balance that with, do I need vision? Do I need some armor? Do I need anything else that might help out in this game? So I often end up getting Rook's Decree on these guys, but it's something that really depends on the game that I'm playing. But Adagio, really good captain, really good top laner right now. Arden, absolute dad, and works really well with Capacitor Plate. Believe it or not, he has got an awesome shield. So obviously, you're getting the hint here that shield and healing captains generally are the way that the meta is going because of the new items. Now, I like Rook's Decree on Arden because you can use your Vanguard and then use Blood for Blood on an enemy and give everybody a huge shield on your team. You could also consider Pulse Weave. It's a good way for Arden to engage, but he doesn't really need it because he's got Gauntlet, so the Gauntlet is a really good way of engaging for Arden anyway. You also have the ability with Rook's Decree to use the Gauntlet, then slam someone with Blood for Blood, and obviously that gives you this massive shield across your team. And I think most of you saw this one coming. Lorelei works with that same build. Get huge shield on your ultimate. She also works with Rook's Decree really nicely, but like you can see with the highest win rate build, you can also consider a Clockwork for the extra cooldown reduction. You can see that War Tread's pretty valuable. A lot of top laners also building War Treads right now because it's just a good item to have, especially in that top lane where you're playing more of a utility top laner. War Treads really adds to that flavor. So those are the top 4 captains. As you can see, everything revolving around that new item Capacitor Plate. It's making, or just outshining most of the captains. A lot of people playing Finn, and I think Finn's pretty good, but he's just not quite up there with these top 4 because of that massive addition of Capacitor Plate to these guys' kits. Alright, off-meta pick, and it's going to be a totally not off-meta captain. Surprise, surprise. But off-meta considering the way that captains have gone with the Capacitor Plate. Fortress still has one of the highest win rates in Vainglory, and still has a high win rate as captain as well. He has got the Mortal Wounds in his kit, so can help shut down some of the healing. I think Pulse Weave is a good item on him. He's already got pretty good engage, but it's a good way to slow someone down when you engage on them as well, so always consider that when looking to build your kit. Fortress in general is kind of the antithesis to the current barrier meta. He really looks to just go in hard on the enemy, try and land those Mortal Wounds to shut down some healing on a specific target. He really synergizes well with heroes that I would say he synergizes well with heroes that are all single target foes, because you lock down that single target and you blow them up. So that's my general meta guide here for 3.4. Obviously there are some things you might not agree with, some things that you do agree with. Feel free to tell me in the comments, but if you tell me that you're a Finn one trick, or you no, Finn's actually okay. Let me think. If you tell me that Sawport is a viable off-meta captain, I'm just not going to listen to you. Right, see you soon guys.